She walked into the hotel she built from the ground up, and the front desk clerk told her they had no room. Within an hour, the entire staff was learning a lesson they'd never forget. Clarice Rowland stepped out of the black sedan, one hand gripping her worn leather travel bag, the other adjusting her wide-brimmed hat to block the Florida sun. Tampa's heat pressed against her skin, but she didn't mind it. What she minded, what always struck her after long travel days, was how differently people looked at her when she wasn't dressed for a boardroom. She wore black sneakers, loose-fitting slacks, and a linen blouse. No jewelry, no makeup, no assistant trailing behind her. Just Clarice. Just tired. She paused in front of the automatic glass doors of Rowland Suites, one of her finest properties, 12 floors of marble and glass elegance, with a rooftop pool that had made the cover of Travel Luxe last spring. She didn't walk in expecting applause. She simply expected a bed. And maybe, if the kitchen was still open, the tomato bisque she helped design with the head chef back in 2013. The front desk was staffed by a young woman who couldn't have been more than 22. Her blazer was slightly too big, the nameplate crooked. Clarice noticed things like that, not to criticize, but because they mattered. Details told you how well a place was being run. Clarice gave a warm smile and stepped forward. "Evening," she said. "I've had a long day. I'll need a suite for the night. Something with a corner view, if possible." The receptionist glanced at her up and down. "We're fully booked." Clarice tilted her head slightly. "Is that so?" "Yes, ma'am." "There's a convention in town. Every room's gone." Clarice glanced behind her at the lobby screen mounted on the wall. It displayed a list of available rooms. 5 were still open, and she caught them before the screen blinked to the next page. "I see you've got vacancies listed right there." "Oh, that's probably an error," the receptionist said quickly, clicking her mouse. "Our system hasn't updated yet." Clarice didn't argue. She simply gave a polite nod. "Could you double-check?" The woman sighed and began typing. Clarice stood patiently, her hand resting on the counter. She was used to long waits. She'd once waited 5 hours in a real estate office back in 1989 to pitch her first hotel idea. This wasn't new, but there was something familiar in the young woman's tone that scratched at her memory. After a few clicks, the receptionist looked up again. "I'm sorry, we can't accommodate walk-ins right now." Clarice kept her voice calm. "I don't have a reservation, no, but I am—" Before she could finish, the woman cut her off. "You can try the Fairgrove Inn 2 blocks over. They're usually cheaper anyway." There it was. Clarice felt her shoulders tighten. But just for a second. She didn't let it show. The 2 women behind her in line shifted uncomfortably. A man at the bell desk looked over, then looked away. Clarice leaned in just slightly. "Do you know who I am?" The receptionist frowned. "No, should I?" "No, not necessarily," Clarice said softly. "But you should know your guests. All of them. Especially the ones whose portraits hang in the hallway behind you." The receptionist blinked, confused. She turned around and saw the oil painting in the gold frame. Clarice Rowland, founder, CEO, the woman whose name sat atop every branded pen, every card key, every pillow tag in the building. I didn't realize—" "You didn't ask." Clarice stepped back from the desk and pulled out her phone. Not frantic, not angry, just clear. She dialed a number, waited, and said 4 words. "I need a sweep." But before the call even ended, a familiar face from corporate was already walking through the front entrance. The receptionist's name tag read Kaylee. Clarice noted it now, not out of spite, but principle. You remember names when someone disrespects you, and sometimes when they don't even realize they did. Kaylee was shifting awkwardly behind the counter, clicking at her keyboard with exaggerated focus, like a child pretending to be busy after being caught doing something wrong. Clarice watched, not saying a word. That silence, measured, intentional, was louder than anything she could have shouted. A moment later, the lobby doors parted again. In walked Roy Velman, District Operations Manager. Mid-40s, grey at the temples, always smelled faintly of coffee and fresh printed paper. He spotted Clarice instantly. "Miss Rowland?" His voice pitched upward with nerves as he strode over, extending his hand. "I didn't know you were visiting Tampa this week." "I wasn't planning to," Clarice replied, still keeping her gaze on Kaylee. "But I needed to see things for myself." Roy turned toward the front desk, the realization slowly crawling across his face. His eyes flicked to the screen behind Kaylee, still displaying the available rooms in bold green. "Ma'am," he said to Kaylee carefully, "this is Ms. Clarice Rowland, the founder." Kaylee froze. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Roy didn't wait for her. He stepped behind the desk and quietly typed something into the system. A sweet key printed. He turned back to Clarice and handed it to her with both hands. "Corner suite, as always. Welcome back." Clarice took the keycard, but didn't move toward the elevators. She stood still, her posture flawless, her presence pressing gently into every corner of the room. "I want to hear what she was thinking," she said evenly, motioning toward Kaylee. Kaylee swallowed hard. I didn't recognize you. I thought you were just..." "Just what?" Clarice asked calmly. Kaylee's voice faltered. "Just someone walking in off the street." "And what made you think someone walking in off the street deserved to be turned away when rooms were clearly available?" I thought you might have been looking for something cheaper." "And..." Clarice raised one brow. "Something cheaper?" Kaylee nodded faintly. "I didn't mean any harm. I was just following policy." "What policy is that?" Clarice asked. Silence. Clarice looked at Roy. "You have a written policy that allows staff to turn away guests based on appearance." Roy shook his head quickly. "No, ma'am." Clarice exhaled slowly. Then what exactly was she following? A quiet tension filled the lobby now. Guests had stopped pretending not to listen. A couple near the elevator watched openly, suitcases in hand. A man at the bar turned his stool to face them. But Clarice didn't perform for the room. She was never one for theatrics. She was a builder. And builders dealt in foundations, not scenes. "I've spent 40 years creating a brand built on respect," she said, her tone steady. "Respect for the guest, respect for the staff, and respect for the name on the door." Roy nodded again, awkwardly, eyes flickering between the two women. "I understand," he said. "Would you like to speak privately?" "No," Clarice said. "This isn't a private matter. It's a cultural one." Kaylee's eyes were wet now, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She looked like she wanted to disappear. Clarice didn't want her to feel small, but she did want her to understand. "I didn't come here looking for a confrontation," Clarice said gently. "I came here because I needed to remember what this place feels like when you walk in as someone who isn't dressed to impress." She looked around the lobby. "I built this place for everyone. Not just the polished, not just the rich. Everyone." But the message hadn't reached every desk, and Clarice was just getting started. Clarice didn't raise her voice. She never had to. By now, Roy had motioned for another associate to temporarily take Kaylee's place behind the desk. She stepped aside reluctantly, her face pale and tight, eyes blinking fast like she wasn't sure whether to cry or apologize. Maybe both. Clarice turned to Roy. "I want the entire front office team in the lounge in 15 minutes. Roy hesitated. "Ma'am, it's after 9. Some of the team's already gone home." "Then bring in whoever's left," Clarice said, still calm. "No yelling, no write-ups, just a conversation. If that's too much to ask at this hour, I'll reschedule for 6 a.m. Roy gave a short, silent nod and stepped away to make the calls. Clarice turned back toward the lobby, letting her eyes travel across the marble floor she chose herself, the textured blue wallpaper she fought the architects to keep, the art installations sourced from black artists across the country. None of it happened by accident. Every single detail in that hotel bore her fingerprint. She didn't build this for image. She built it because she remembered too well what it was like to be treated like an afterthought. While Roy made his calls, a young woman near the bar approached her, nervously adjusting the strap on her crossbody bag. "Excuse me," she said, her voice low. "I'm sorry, but are you Clarice Rowland?" Clarice offered a faint smile. "Yes, I am. My mom told me about you. She's in real estate, Said you were the first black woman to open a 5-star hotel in the Gulf Coast area. Clarice's eyes softened. That's true. The girl looked down, then back up. It's just cool to see you here. Like, actually here. Sometimes I show up unannounced. Clarice said with a wink. Keeps everyone honest? They both chuckled. Just then Roy returned. The staff's waiting in the lounge. Clarice nodded and followed him through the wide hallway, past the row of polished elevators, into a small glass-walled meeting room with soft lighting and grey leather chairs. 6 employees sat inside, faces ranging from confused to guilty. Kaylee sat furthest from the door. She looked up as Clarice entered, but didn't hold her gaze. Clarice walked in and stayed standing. I want to make something clear, she said. This isn't about shaming anyone. We're not here to talk about skin color, power, or even respect. Yet. We're here to talk about judgment. She paused, letting the word settle. Judgment is what happens when your assumptions speak before your professionalism. Judgment is when a woman in sneakers is treated differently than a man in a blazer. Judgment is how you lose loyal customers before they even get a room key. The staff sat quietly. No phones out, no distractions. I've been coming in and out of Roland Suites in all kinds of clothing for years. I've walked through these doors in silk and diamonds, and I've walked in wearing flats and sweatpants. The way I'm treated shouldn't change based on that. Clarice turned slightly toward Kaylee. And it shouldn't change for anyone else either. Kaylee opened her mouth to respond, but stopped herself. Clarice waited. Gave her room. I didn't mean to disrespect you, Kaylee said finally. I really didn't. I believe you, Clarice said. But intention doesn't cancel impact. Kaylee looked down again. Her voice was barely audible. I made you feel like you didn't belong. Clarice nodded. And if I wasn't me, you'd have turned away another guest who needed shelter for the night. She turned to the rest of the room. That's what I care about. If we're going to use my name on the door, then every person who walks through that door better feel like they matter. A silence filled the room, but it wasn't heavy. It was reflective. But Clarice wasn't here just to talk. She had something to show them next. Clarice didn't sit down. She never did when she wanted people to truly listen. There was something about standing, about meeting eyes from above, that made her words hit harder without ever having to be loud. She glanced at the group, then said, I want to take you all somewhere. Right now. The room shifted. A few employees looked to Roy for guidance, but he offered none. Clarice was the only authority in the room now. She led them out of the lounge, back through the lobby, and toward the main hallway. Guests watched with quiet curiosity, unsure if they were witnessing a disciplinary meeting or a press conference. Clarice didn't look left or right. She moved forward, slow and sure, as if walking through the bones of her own legacy. They arrived at a small, quiet hallway near the concierge's office. At the far end, a large portrait hung on the wall. Clarice, at age 34, standing in front of her first hotel in St. Petersburg. The frame was slightly dusted, the lighting above it dim. Clarice stopped. This photo was taken 6 weeks after I signed the deal on my first property, she said. I used my mother's life insurance payout and 3 loans I wasn't supposed to qualify for. She turned to face them. I was denied a room once, in 1982. That's why I built Roland Suites, not to get revenge, but to make sure no one like me ever had to stand outside a hotel wondering if they'd be allowed in. The room was silent. Even the staff not involved in the earlier interaction had gone still. Clarice gestured toward the photo again. That woman was tired, scared, but she believed in something. And now we have 19 properties. You don't have to remember the number, just remember the reason. Then she walked back toward the lobby, stopping once more at the front desk. A security guard stood there, middle-aged, clean uniform, alert posture. Clarice turned to him. You recognized me earlier, didn't you? He cleared his throat. Yes, ma'am. Why didn't you say anything? He hesitated. Didn't feel like my place. Clarice looked at him with a trace of a smile. It's always your place to speak when something doesn't sit right. He gave a small nod. Not ashamed, but reflective. Then, from behind them, a housekeeper stepped forward, young, probably no more than 19. She held a laundry cart and wore oversized gloves. "I knew it was you," she said, almost in a whisper. "I saw your interview with Ms. Cheryl Reeves on PBS. You talked about bathrooms being the first thing you cleaned before you could afford real staff." Clarice let out a warm breath. "That's right." The young woman gave a nervous shrug. "I just didn't want to get involved. I figured the front desk knew what they were doing." Clarice walked over to her. "What's your name?" "Amaya." "Well, Amaya, sometimes doing the right thing means stepping in, even when it's awkward." Amaya nodded slowly, then said, "I'll remember that." Clarice smiled again and turned to face the gathered team. "Titles don't give you permission to lead. Courage does. Some of you stood back tonight. That's human. But what you do next? That's leadership." She paused, letting the words settle in their own weight. "We're not just in the businesses of rooms and reservations. We're in the business of humanity. And right now, humanity needs all the help it can get." But Clarice knew words weren't enough. There had to be real consequences and real change. By the time the team made their way back to the staff lounge, the room felt different. Not tense, just alert. Like something important had taken root and no one wanted to be the first to disturb it. Clarice remained standing. Her bag still hung from her shoulder. She hadn't even taken off her travel shoes. Roy stood by the wall, silent, taking mental notes. Clarice spoke. "Let's talk systems," she said. "Because when someone makes a mistake, it usually means a system already failed." She gestured to the front desk supervisor, a man in his early 30s named Rylan, who'd joined midway through the discussion. "What's the official procedure when someone walks in without a reservation?" Rylan cleared his throat. "We're instructed to check for availability, then offer current rates. If we're over 90% full, we're supposed to ask a manager to approve walk-in bookings." "And were you there when I came in?" Clarice asked. "No, Mom. I was on dinner break." Clarice turned toward Kaylee, who was still seated but now holding a notepad, taking everything in with quiet intensity. "Did you know that protocol?" Kaylee nodded, almost embarrassed. "I just assumed the rooms on the board weren't available. They sometimes aren't." "But you didn't ask," Clarice replied. "You didn't double-check. You didn't involve a supervisor." Kaylee stayed quiet. It was a hard truth to swallow, but she didn't run from it. Clarice took a breath. "So this isn't just about attitude. It's about training. It's about systems that allow assumptions to grow into decisions. Bad ones." She moved toward a whiteboard in the corner of the lounge and uncapped a marker. "One of my mentors once told me, if you leave gaps, people will fill them, with their own biases. That's why policy matters." She wrote 3 words: awareness, access, accountability. "We're going to rewrite parts of your intake script, not next week, now, tonight." A few heads turned toward Roy in surprise. He simply gave a single nod. Clarice continued, "I want new language in place that forces engagement, not assumption. If someone asks for a room, they deserve your full attention, no matter what they look like, no matter what they're wearing." Amaya, still standing by the door, raised her hand gently. "Can we include something about letting staff speak up if they see something off? Like giving people permission to say something without getting in trouble?" Clarice smiled. "Absolutely. That goes under access. You can't change a place by staying quiet." Then the security guard, whose name tag read Melvin, spoke. "Ms. Rowland, can I ask something?" "Go ahead." "What happens to someone who messes up once but learns from it?" Clarice gave a long pause before responding. "They get a second chance, if they show they're ready for one. This isn't about punishment, it's about alignment. Either you walk with the brand or you walk away from it." Her eyes landed back on Kaylee. "You've got a choice to make. I'm not going to fire you tonight, but you'll need to reapply for your position tomorrow. Not because I enjoy making anyone jump through hoops, but because I need to know that you understand what just happened." Kaylee didn't protest. She simply nodded. "I'd like to come back." Clarice nodded in return. "Then come back better." She turned to the rest of the group. "I'm not interested in perfect. I'm interested in real people doing real work with real care. She capped the marker and stepped back from the board. We've got properties across the southeast, and I plan to show up at every single one before the year ends. Some of you might see me in a suit, others might see me in jogging pants. Either way, greet me like you'd greet anyone else, with your eyes, your voice, and your full attention. But Clarisse wasn't just leaving them with new rules. She was about to leave something even more permanent behind. By now the clock was nearing 11 p, but no one had left. Not a single yawn, not a glance at the time. Clarisse had taken what could have been just another awkward HR incident and turned it into something no one in that room would forget. She walked slowly back toward the center of the lounge, her voice a little lower, more reflective. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, she began, and some of them cost me more than just money. They cost me time, relationships, but I've always believed in cleaning up after them. She turned to Roy. Bring in HR first thing in the morning. We're revising onboarding materials, and we're starting monthly empathy training. Not some glossy, generic slideshow. I want case studies. I want real stories. Roy nodded without hesitation. Clarisse looked around. People think running a hotel is about rooms, rates, and reviews. But it's about people. The ones who show up exhausted. The ones carrying secrets, grief, or pride in their luggage. And the people who greet them. You all have more power than you think, she paused. That kind of power has to be handled with care. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather notebook. She held it up. This little thing kept me grounded for years. Every new property, I wrote the same 3 questions in the back. She opened the back cover and read aloud. Did every guest feel seen? Did every employee feel valued? Would I be proud if my mother walked in tonight? Silence again. Not a heavy one, just deeply personal. I'm giving this notebook to you, Roy, she said, handing it over. Scan those pages. Send them to every location. I want every general manager to answer those 3 questions weekly. And I want the answers on my desk. Roy looked stunned. You still carry this around? Every day, Clarisse said. Legacy doesn't carry itself. Then she turned to Kaylee once more. Her voice didn't harden, but it didn't soften either. You'll come in tomorrow, shadow someone on every shift. Housekeeping, concierge, kitchen, maintenance. Learn this place from the inside out. You can't represent something you don't understand. Yes, ma'am, Kaylee said. I want to. Clarisse gave a faint nod. Then she turned to Amaya, still holding her laundry cart just inside the door. You spoke up when you didn't have to. That means something. You're getting a raise. Roy, make it happen. Amaya's eyes widened. Wait, seriously? You didn't just see something. You remembered it. That's what leadership looks like. Clarisse then addressed the room one final time. This hotel is a reflection of everyone in it. The moment we forget that, the brand means nothing, and I refuse to let it fall apart from the inside. One of the bartenders who'd quietly joined the back of the room raised his hand. Can we keep doing these meetings? Like, even if you're not here? Clarisse suddenly for the first time all night. Absolutely. I want a culture, not a performance. She turned to Roy again. Budget for monthly roundtables. No suits, no scripts, just real people talking. He jotted it down in her old notebook, now his responsibility to protect. Then Clarisse checked her watch. It's late. I've got one more thing to do before I call it a night. The group began to disperse slowly, murmuring among themselves. Not drained, energized, changed. Clarisse walked back through the hallway alone, past her portrait, past the soft glow of the lobby lights. She didn't stop until she reached the elevator. Roy caught up just before the doors closed. Are you really staying the night? Clarisse pressed the button for the 12th floor. Of course. In the penthouse? She looked at him sideways. Where else would I sleep in my own house? But Clarisse's night wasn't over just yet. She still had one more message to send. The elevator doors opened with a quiet slide onto the 12th floor. Clarisse stepped out, her shoes brushing the thick carpet that lined the private hallway. There were only 2 suites on this level. Hers was at the end, the one she personally designed 12 years ago after sleeping in over 300 hotel rooms that never quite got it right. She unlocked the door with the keycard Roy had handed her earlier. The door clicked, and she entered. Warm, neutral lighting bathed the room. The curtains were half drawn, revealing the Tampa skyline in amber glow. The suite hadn't changed much over the years. The same white leather armchairs, the walnut desk, the built-in bookshelf lined with titles she'd curated herself. She set her bag down and walked over to the writing table, slowly easing herself into the chair. There was no champagne, no fruit basket. She didn't need any of that. Just a notepad and a pen. Clarice pulled open her laptop, but it sat idle while she reached for a sheet of hotel stationery. Handwritten letters meant more to her. They slowed the moment down, made it count. At the top of the page she wrote, "To all Rowland staff, from the desk of Clarice Rowland." She paused, tapped the pen against the table twice, then began writing. "Tonight reminded me why this brand matters, not because of how we look, but because of how we treat people when no one's watching. If you forget everything else, remember this. Our work starts the moment someone walks through our door, not after they show a card, not after they confirm a reservation, but the moment they arrive." She took a breath, her pen hovering. Anyone can give good service to a VIP, but only the best among us offer the same to someone who looks like they can't give us anything in return. Her eyes rested on the view outside. Distant traffic, quiet buildings, so many stories behind each lit window. Every guest who steps through our door carries a story we haven't read yet. Don't skip to the ending. Don't judge the cover. Read the whole person. She signed her name at the bottom, not with flair, just a signature. Strong, simple, certain. Clarice folded the paper neatly and slid it into an envelope. Tomorrow morning, it would be scanned and sent to every property in the chain. Printed, framed, posted near every employee entrance. She didn't need applause. She needed alignment. She closed her laptop. For the first time all day, she kicked off her shoes. Then she stood, walked to the window, and looked out. Somewhere below, the staff she'd spoken to were getting ready to go home. Some in silence, some probably already texting about what happened. But they wouldn't forget it. Not because she was famous, but because she showed up when it counted, and made sure they did too. A quiet knock at the door pulled her from the window. Room service. She opened it. A young man stood there with a silver tray. "Ma'am, I have your tomato bisque." Clarice raised a brow, amused. "Who ordered it?" He smiled. "Ms. Amaya sent it up. Said you helped create the recipe. Said you'd probably want it." Clarice took the tray, nodding. She was right. He turned to go, then paused. "My mom worked at the Rowland in Tallahassee. She always said you weren't just a boss. You were someone who remembered people's names. Even dishwashers." Clarice gave him a look that held no performance. Just warmth. "What's your name?" "Deshawn." "Well, Deshawn, thank you for the soup." He smiled. "Good night, Mom." She shut the door gently, carried the tray to the desk, and sat back down. Legacy wasn't built by big speeches. It was built by small moments remembered. She took a spoonful of the soup. Still perfect. Still hers. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to think about the way you treat people, especially when no one's watching. And if it meant something, consider subscribing. There's more where this came from.